For our lecture portion, we're going to talk about two different topics. And there is a good chance, depending on how long this first section is, I might break this up into two videos to give you just time to kind of think about each of these topics. To begin with, we are going to think about teaching in the for the 21st century and what our focuses are and what is essential as we prepare students, again, for our aim to be participants in a democratic society. And so we have key insight into a few of not just those knowledge skills, but the skills that students need to be able to perform. And so in our instruction, we have a heightened sense of the need for students to have keen observation and listening skills. We also want students to have more of an ability to think about the processes that they are using as they're gaining knowledge. Inside of social studies, we want mathematics, even though it's a number form, we want to think about how math can be used to communicate social information. The need for increased access to literature, and that comes in both fiction and nonfiction. And I will also say in the way we define a text. You're going to see that in this lecture. Power of technology has really come to the forefront very quickly in the 21st century. From primary grades on, we want students to wonder and to question and to figure out ways to answer some of those wonderings and questions. We want academic values to be addressed as social values, like this is just what it means to be a good person. These two kind of go together, and you'll see this somewhat even in the Missouri Learning Standards, that we're focusing, instead of discrete information, we want to lean more towards relationships among topics. We want to trend also to not approach the teaching of social studies as one that is from cover to cover of a textbook. We're considering more of the less is more approach. We want students to gain more depth of knowledge as opposed to a lot of just different information about a lot of different topics. So think about it for a moment, and you can pause this video. Think about all of the places you can get information from. If you are learning about something, and it doesn't have to be inside of social studies, but if you were going to try to answer a question you have, where would you go? And how do you get that information? Again, pause the video and think about that for just a moment. So now that you've had a moment to consider how, as people going through this world, answering questions about things that you want to explore, I want to take this into elementary social studies, and I want to introduce to you, and I'm assuming this is an introduction, the concept of layering texts within presentation. This is moving beyond assigning readings, lecturing, assigning readings to students in a classroom where chapter questions written in the textbook are assigned. And I'm assuming that all of you are familiar with that, quote, approach to teaching social studies. So what I am suggesting is this concept of layering text. And this is where you would choose, and notice it says text in quotes, and we'll get into that in a moment, beyond a textbook to explore a concept in social studies. We put these texts then together around the same learning objective, or we put these texts as teachers together in front of our students in order to integrate information gleaned from multiple sources, just like we would in the quote real world. And as you gather information, you know that you get information from experiences you've had yourself. You have information that comes to you and you think about from other things you've quote read, and you have information from things you've seen out in the world, people you've talked to, movies you've watched, news, and things such as that. This is called making text connections, and this is very popular in language arts courses / reading courses. We know that strong readers and those that comprehend text pull from and make, I should say, connections as they read. Text to text means, hey, this reminds me of another, and this chart, anchor chart says book, but it could be another thing I've, quote, read. We have connections to our own experiences. Hey, I went there. I know what this place is like because I've experienced it on a family vacation, for example, or I went to a museum that I was able to see this thing. Text to world, again, I remember my parents talking about this. I remember seeing this on the news. You have to take a moment, though, this funny cartoon that I saw when we talk about text connections and how that translates probably to some of our students today. So why is it important or helpful? You know, I always have to get to the why behind everything we're learning in our social studies course. So if we think about the why behind layering text, I want you to think about this. To a certain degree, it evens the playing field for students. And by that I mean, in many situations, we may have students who haven't experienced the world, who haven't read volumes of information, who may not have, again, those worldly connections. By putting students in a position, if we do this layering up front, it kind of simulates those experiences for a student. Again, I already mentioned this, but it does replicate how people really do learn in real life. It also, when people are in their profession of social scientists, this is how information is gained in the professional world. We pull from multiple sources. It works very well because of the various medium that we're going to be using and targeting specific information. It works very well for students who have varying academic struggles. For English language learners, providing information in multiple medias helps. For students who may have special education needs, that it helps as well. And while not central, it is important for me to make sure you know that the way layered texts are posed are very, very similar to how the Missouri Assessment Program does pose questions. So it is a way to bolster those achievement scores and to give your students a fair advantage of having the experience of having to pull from multiple sources, just like they will have to do on state assessments. You're going to explore this in just a moment, but when we talk about layering text, this Padlet is a perfect example of a curation of layered text that a fifth grade teacher created. I want you to take a moment just to kind of look at it. Again, these are the quote texts, and we can use the word media that we're going to place in front of students. If you notice here, this is an illustration. We have a video of Harriet Tubman. We have an article. We have another video and yet another one. Again, same topic, multiple perspectives. We have a painting that students can draw from. And we also have photographs for students to research. Again, students would have questions posed to them that they could answer by pulling across these various forms of communication. So when I asked you earlier, where do you get information from? Here are some suggestions to you. I want you to think about, as you layer text in front of students, and in place, I should say, in front of students, you can pull from podcasts. There are lots of virtual tours of museums where you can pull articles, video clips, poetry, recipes, songs, chapter books, picture books, image studies like I showed you, the painting, but then we also had photographs, movie clips, and trunks or treasures. Let's get into a couple of these. I wanted to give you a link because we are podcasts, but sometimes combing through podcasts can be kind of an arduous task. So I have given you a link, and I wanted you to specifically look at this site called The Past and the Curious. There's some very interesting social studies links. For movies, you may think, where in the world do we start with movie clips? Wing Clips is a great source. I don't even know how many movies are in clips of movies that relate to a certain theme or to illustrate something are included. I do want to let you know, this is not for you to put in front of students as far as this wingclips.com connection, or link, I should say. Please make sure you preview anything you include, because this is for high school students. This can be used for elementary, high school. This can be used for adults. The only lens or people that should be looking at wingclips.com, the actual site, is you, because there are some very controversial topics and there could be some language included in some of those clips. It's always a good practice, by the way, any song, any article, anything you put in front of students, especially movies, you always want to preview those things first and know that content with elementary students in particular. For trunks or treasures, I don't know if you're aware of the fact, but museums will often have trunks that they put together that for a very reasonable fee, or if you're an educator, sometimes they're free, that you can check out, pick up, check out, and use in your classroom. They often will contain books, they'll contain posters, artifacts that students can have experience with. These are two different sites that I really want you to go to so you can see how many amazing things you have access to. Let's talk now about how do you organize for this layering of text. You heard me mention, I'm just going to give you two. There's more than two available, but I'm going to give you two that work really well in using technology to organize this layering, curation of text into one spot that's easy for students to access. You can't have a disorganized layer of text. You don't want the process of accessing these texts to supersede the act of learning. So you want something that's definitely seamless. Padlet and ThingLink are two that I believe are very easy from a teacher's perspective. I want you to take a moment to start with Padlet. You are able to interact with what I showed you earlier. I want you to actually kind of get a feel for what going through those texts would feel like. On Padlet, it can serve as a wall, meaning you can use it kind of as a graffiti wall where students can collaborate around something, then post their thinking. Or you can use it interactively with students, such as creating a layered text set. It is free. There is an optional upgrade. There are caps on the amount of information you can put if you get the free version. And there are limits to the Padlets you store. You can only store 3 long term, but If you're crafty, there are easy ways for you to get around that. You could save the link somewhere else in a folder on your drive and then just continually upload those folders and just create new Padlets for each year. Once you've explored Padlet, I want you to look at ThingLink. ThingLink is typically one, when I present it to students, they're very surprised by it, and it's just intriguing. ThingLink, I've given you a video so you could see how this works. It is so cool. ThingLink has one picture and all of these different places on the picture where you click on them and you can embed videos, songs, articles, even questions for your students to answer inside of like Google Docs, or yeah, you could do Google Docs or Google Forms. This is endless. It is free. There is an optional, very cheap $35, I think, upgrade. It is capped at 1,000 views per year, so it seems reasonable enough. If you get the free version, there is the ThingLink logo. That never bothers me, but there is a logo that is on the ThingLink. If you get the upgrade, the logo goes away. With all good things, I believe we should heed a little bit of caution, and I do want to be realistic as far as using layering text and what that looks like. You need to be selective and really consider what you're putting in that layered text. Too much information can be just a rabbit hole for students that you've kind of designed. It can be overwhelming. You can consider cutting, using your screen capture and cutting portions of an article. That will work instead of lengthy articles. Remember, we have elementary students we're working with here, so we don't want anything too much. You also want to consider, in being selective, you want to consider the audience and if it's appropriate for meeting your learning objectives, but also for the age of your students. This level of kind of independence with students sometimes can be a little difficult to engage if they're not just clicking around on things, and if they are truly engaged in the work. For teachers, it can feel uncontrolled. You know, we're used to delivering information to make sure the students heard what you wanted them to assigning one specific reading that you're very familiar with so you know that they read it. This is a little unbridled, and it is a little open and could be a little uncomfortable to some teachers. So just be aware of that. You must have that strong access to technology. This would be something very difficult to do if you only have two stationary computers in your classroom. You could partner up to do this, but it would be best if students had one-on-one devices. The students' technology skills, for the most part, students should be fairly well at just clicking on each of the links. However, if you're doing things within the questioning portion for social studies, you may have to, that may take a little bit more support in teaching them that technology. I guess the biggest part is this takes time to do, and it's much faster for teachers to lecture, honestly, and to assign text. But when we think about it, we're teaching for forever and not just for a lesson. We're looking to teach deeply. This format for social studies definitely does that. And so one more, I thought I had another slide. One more thing about that, within the time that it takes. I'm not suggesting you do these for every single unit. You're going to want to look at what your priority standards are. What are the big things within your curriculum, within your Missouri Learning Standards, that maybe you just want to start off with one per subject even in a year. So you might want to make just one social studies experience. just one science. And just at first, just kind of monitor it and see where it goes. This isn't intended to necessarily be in every single unit that you teach. I don't like to make these videos any longer than about 20 minutes, and we're at that point right now. So if you would, we're going to dive next into technology. That will be a separate video on our module Canvas. I'll see you inside of our technology presentation.